So welcome everybody. As you're aware, this year we have introduced a special VR sidebar to the Knowledge series at the 10th Film Bazaar in keeping with the times. Many of you would have already watched some of the amazing, almost physical VR experiences at the Film Bazaar VR Lounge powered by Samsung Gear VR. We've been audience to sessions on the technology, research around it, and its application to telling your story ideas in an audiovisual medium. And now it's time for getting a sense of what is it that we learn or unlearn as filmmakers in terms of cinema tools to create that VR experience. So here's the closing session of the VR sidebar, Busting Myths, Immersive Technology, and its Role in Future Cinema Narratives. We have with us independent VR filmmaker, interactive story architect, ex-head of film acquisitions, ex-executive director of Arte France Cinema, Michel Reilhac. So may I please welcome you to join us here. At present, he heads content at Submarine TV in Amsterdam. And in conversation with him, we have esteemed filmmaker, Sudhir Mishra. So may I please welcome you.
This is all as new to me as it is to some of you. So as a filmmaker, I'd be very interested in understanding from Reilhac, how do I, if I were making films on VR, what is it that I have to change? What is it? There are many questions. I've seen some films, but I'll first let Michel talk about VR filmmaking and whether it is different, how different, what is traditional cinema, how different is the new technology, what are the challenges, what am I supposed to learn?
Great. Well, what I want to do is, as quickly as possible, run you through... Oh, no, maybe I should sit down, or no? I prefer standing. Run you through what cinema and VR have in common, what are the rules of what we know, how to do to make flat films. And I use the word flat not in a pejorative way, but in the world of VR we call flatties, everything that is done on flat screens as opposed to VR. So there are rules that apply from film to VR. And the first rule that applies is that it's not because VR is a new medium that magically it will transform a bad story into a good story. Story always comes first, and this applies to VR. There's no reason why a bad story should all of a sudden become interesting just because it's told in 360 degrees. In that field, all the narrative principles of cinema apply. The hero's journey, the transformational arc of the story, everything that makes a story compelling, emotionally, psychologically, action-wise, apply in VR in exactly the same way. A lot of people tell me, well, what about the role of the director in VR? There's no more point of view, since the director doesn't have to select a screen, a window on the world. The frame loses any significance. The point of view is gone. Well, that's not true. It's just displaced, and we'll try and see how that works in VR. So there is a whole set of the basic rules that guide filmmaking, flat filmmaking, that apply in VR. And I'm saying this for film producers here or filmmakers. Don't consider VR a strange new land where you have to forget everything and learn new things to apply. Don't be scared to explore it, because you will find that almost everything you know in filmmaking applies to VR. A lot of people also consider that VR is only for short films. That's not true anymore. At Venice, a couple months ago at the Venice Film Festival, where I curated the first VR section, we screened the first feature-length ever in VR, Jesus VR, The Life of Jesus, which is going to come out at Christmas. And all the major filmmakers in Hollywood are all working on a feature-length project in VR. One of the funny things that happened unexpectedly in VR is the fact that you can go in a VR app to watch a flat movie, for instance, here on the moon. You can choose to go on the moon and watch La Dolce Vita. You can decide, if you're tired of the moon, to go under the water. You can go in the desert, you can go anywhere and just watch a regular flat movie. Netflix makes all of its catalog available in VR. You can watch it in a living room, in a cabin, a fancy cabin in the mountains, in the Rocky Mountains by a fireplace, and watch films in that way. But of course, there are specific rules to VR filmmaking, and I would like to just mention just a few. The first one that is key to understanding how you can make a film in VR and how specific it is that the fourth wall is broken. This is one of the basic rules of both live arts and cinema, is that you are protected as an audience in a way, the same way like right now, you are protected from both of us by an invisible line that separates the position of the audience sitting safely protected from the world of what happens on screen or on stage, separated from us performing in a way by a separate wall. In VR, that wall is broken. It's no longer separating you, the audience, from what happens all around you, because you are in the middle of it. You're no longer protected. And the fact that this fourth wall is broken for good makes you more vulnerable as an audience, because all of a sudden you're immersed in the middle of the fiction or the documentary or whatever it is that you are watching. You are a part of it and you're a center of it. In that way, the big difference is to understand that virtual reality is experiential. You are no longer being told the story to, you are embarked in the story and you live it as much as you're being told it. In that way, there's a misunderstanding that is already existing of confusing 360-degree video with VR. 360-degree video is when you can watch a VR film on a flat screen by swiping or moving with your mouse so that you can see, you can have different angles of the 360-degree view on your screen. In that setting, the fourth wall is still there. It's not a VR experience. When a broadcaster, for instance, decides to invest in a VR film and says, we will have that VR film on our website, you can watch it 360 degree. This is not VR. It is 360-degree video, and it remains a flatty experience, not an immersive experience. The real change that VR brings is a change in paradigm, as I said. The VR experience is made of three specific kinds of experience. The first one is the immersiveness. As I said, when you find yourself surrounded by a sphere, which is the story world in which you're projected, you're immersed in the middle of the action. Once again, you're no longer protected, you're a part of it, and you're at the heart of it. What that does is that it creates a sense of presence unequaled before. It gives you the real feeling of being there and then with the characters, with whatever happens around you. You're not watching, you are present within it. And what that creates is empathy. Empathy is this feeling of understanding and emotionally connecting with whatever and whoever surrounds you at that point. So those elements make VR an experience more than just being told something and being protected from it. The second specific thing about VR is that you need to think in terms of spheres. As filmmakers or film producers or audiences, we've been trained, we've been used to think in rectangles. It can be the rectangle of our phone, of our laptop. It can be the huge rectangle of a large-scale theater, cinema. But we always think, and actually if you think of it, it's been the case since the dawn of humanity that our system of representing the world has always been rectangles, small ones or big ones, but flat surfaces on which we represent the world. And in a way, film screens are flat surfaces on which the world is represented. VR is the first time that you can actually change that and think in terms of spheres. You no longer in VR want to think in terms of just a window cut out in the world that the director is going to select for you and decide what you're going to be focusing on, but you're going to be immersed in a sphere made up of the stitched cameras that will have been used between 2 to 32 cameras to make a VR film. This notion of spheres is absolutely key for the filmmaker because it reproduces the exact position that we all have in the real world. The reason why we are so selfish or self-centered, all of us, is because it's not our fault. It's not because we're bad. It's just because this is the position we are. Like here, we are all in the same room. We're experiencing the same moment. But each of us, we're experiencing it from a different perspective where each of us, we are the center of our world. We are always the center of our world. And this is why we do not understand why others don't see us as the center of the world. We are the centers of our world, of our perception, and we think our perception is the global and only possible perception. It's a human bias, and we're born like this, and it's our way of being in the world, and VR reproduces this. That's also the strength of VR. It's because it reproduces the exact same situation that we're in the world. The third fact that makes VR special, and I could go on for hours about this, is what I call presence design. Since we are at the heart of the sphere that is the fiction world or the documentary world that I'm projected in, I need to know who I am. And this is a key question, which is brand new. This is never something that a director in Flatty's films needs to answer. The position of the viewer is already set. The viewer will be in their living room or in a theater watching the film on a flat surface, on a flat screen protected by the fourth wall. In VR, because the viewer will be at the heart of the sphere, I, as a scriptwriter or as a film director, need to decide who is that person. Do I have a body? If I have a body, do I see it? It can't be my body because the technology does not allow me to have my own body live in a film in VR. So it's someone else's body. Do I know who that person is? Do I know what I look like? Do I know my face? Do I recognize myself from having seen myself elsewhere in the film? If I don't have a body, if I'm abstract, when I look down, I don't see any legs or arms, can the characters in the story see me? Or are they aware that I'm here, even though I don't physically exist? Those questions are absolutely key, and they are very, very new, and we don't know yet what to do with it.
It's not that I'm invisible, but I'm there.
It's what?
It's not like I'm invisible, but I'm there.
You can be invisible, but you're there. It would be a diegetic presence.
Yeah.
But it's not the only choice. What I'm saying is that if you decide you're God, like you are in films sometimes, then you need to make sure that you constantly follow that logic. And it's not all that obvious. I won't go too much in detail with this, but this is a field that we need to explore. And once again, the reason why it's a key question is because VR is more about living a moment than being told a story about that moment. One of the other elements is specific to VR is spatial writing. How do you write a story when now you no longer want to focus on just one thing happening in one corner of the sphere, but you need to be aware of all the things that are happening around? If you're writing a thriller, for instance, there may be a conversation happening in a cafe between two people on this corner. Outside in the street, someone is getting killed, and in the kitchen, I'm finding that someone who is a suspect is actually doing something that proves to me that he is the guilty one. Now, all of these things, I cannot watch them at the same time. I'm going to run into one of those situations. But as a director and as a scriptwriter, I need to write all of them, and I need to make sense of all of them so that they belong to the same dramaturgy, they belong to the same progression in the story. How do I materialize that? How do I share my script then with the people I'm going to be working with? How do I make it clear of what happens 360 degrees when I need to synchronize multiple actions that are happening at the same time inside the sphere? This is a very strange question. Where is the front? But it's a key question in VR. For instance, if I was making a film of this moment now, you would be putting on the headset. If I was putting on the headset now, my view of this room would be the front is in front of me, like the side of the room would be in front of me. This would be the back. As I'm moving through the film and I'm cutting scenes, I'm editing one scene after another, I have to make sure, in this case, that the front of the next scene will be at the same place. What that means is that my viewer, when I'm cutting to the next scene, may be looking this way. In which case, I have to make sure that when the next scene starts, my front of this space remains there and not in front of where he or she is watching. This may seem obvious.
So you still have control, that means in some sense.
You do not have control of where the viewer is watching. No, that you don't have.
No, but when I start the next scene,
I have control of
where I begin the scene.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
what I was thinking of when I was seeing those films. That at least the narrative, where the
There's
next
a consistency.
Consistency, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is key. But if my next scene, after this scene inside here, my next scene is outside on the beach, then where will be my front?
Absolutely.
How am I going
Yeah.
to decide what is the front of the next scene? So what I'm going to do, and this becomes very tricky, I have to think in terms of potentially where will my viewer be watching? At the end of this scene, it may be that you are the focal point because you are talking and saying something fascinating. So most of my viewers will be looking here. In the next scene on the beach, I want the focus point to be on a boat, people going on a boat and going for a trip. So I'm saying, okay, chances are most people will be watching this way. So I'll be here. So I'm going to place the front of my next scene here, where you are, so that most people will start seeing what it is that is most important. Sorry, this is maybe a little bit confused and tricky, but it is one of the questions of VR. I'm showing here a sketch of one of the projects I'm working on now, which represents a scene shot at night in a street in Berlin, and we experienced with only 2 cameras. So I needed to share with the team, the crew, what we were going to be doing. So what I did is that here, for instance, I represented the stitch line. Since we only had 2 cameras, I needed to show a place where it would be oriented so that this line is a line that we want to have as little action go across of it in the filming, because that's where you run the risk of having the most errors in fixing the image. You need so this was a very rough sketch, and on the opposite page I had the dialogue continuity. But I needed to explain during that scene what was going to happen so that the cameraman knew. I indicated where was the camera. I indicated where were the characters. This was a car in which the scene was filmed, so that they knew where people were. And I indicated the move during the scene. In this case, there was a scene with a fox that appeared and did that move during the scene. So on the script, I need to have a visual representation of the space, the 360-degree space around the camera. I need as much as possible to indicate where the stitch line or stitch lines need to be, so I avoid action across those stitch lines, and on the opposite page, the dialogue. Now I'm using a different system where I'm having a color-coded system where the characters are being identified by their color, so I can go from the dialogue to the drawing and it becomes clearer. The focus design is something that we alluded to, which is how do I handle my power as a director when I cannot exercise it anymore? By this I mean there are two groups of psychological behaviors for directors in VR that way. There's a group of directors who absolutely want to keep control of where their spectators are watching. If I'm doing in 360 degree a big scene with a special effect on one side of the sphere, I want to make sure everyone watches it. So I'm going to turn the light down everywhere else in the sphere. I'm going to turn the sound down. I'm going to make the sound louder where that scene happens to attract attention. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that my viewers are watching that particular corner of my sphere. I belong to the other family, which is more of the psychoanalytical family of letting go, where you may be spending all your money in that scene on a wonderful special effect, but there's no way you can be sure everyone's going to watch it. And you have to embrace the fact that maybe while you're doing this amazing thing there, they'll be just watching the lights and the birds on that one because they think it's nice and they find it beautiful. And so you have to give up that kind of power, which is very difficult to do for
Totally,
us, for a traditional film.
I'm getting the jitters now.
But the reward of letting go in that case is that you find that your viewers want to come back and experience your film several times.
That's what I was, So, I mean, it goes into watching the film again and again. So, like in life, maybe, it's like almost you can replay life and go back. And
you can never replay life and go back, except in VR.
Except in VR, yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly, yeah.
And what's interesting is that a lot of people who have missed something in a film know about the fact that they've missed it through their friends or people telling them, did you see that? Did you see that thing happen? Wasn't that incredible? Say, oh no, I was watching the birds. And so you want to watch it again to see it. In the VR sidebar, there was a film that we showed called Evolution of Verse by Chris Milk, where there's a huge special effect of a train running on the side of a lake, and then all of a sudden you're in the center of the lake and running over water and running over you. The train runs over you and transforms into this cloud of birds.
So then it's like, when we discuss often in cinema, form and content, but every audience sees a different film in their heads anyway, because it's depending on their point of view. I can make a film about Pakistan, and, some people will find it hideous and violent, and some people will find it patriotic, depending on, So you can, in a sense, make a film where there are multiple perspectives, and every time you've done you've gone back, you've seen another perspective on something, I mean, how do you use the technology in order to create something that, that you haven't been able to create before in cinema, rather than just doing the same thing? Repeating, what you did traditionally with cinema,
Absolutely, you could use that technology and the fact that you have different options to include in the same scene different points of views, so that you could interpret the scene actually from different points of view within the same scene.
Yeah, so you could remake Rashomon in a different way,
You could. Absolutely, it would cost a lot more money, but you could.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't want to go over too long, but this is the idea of focus design, whether you want to control where the viewer goes or not. And then the last thing I just wanted to allude to, which is the new frontier of VR, which is non-existent in film, is interaction. As the technology evolves, we're going to have more and more devices and ways to interact physically from the physical reality space into the virtual space. We will be able to move, there's this thing that everybody is looking forward to called room scale. Room scale is when you, for instance, I'm here and I want to get closer to this. So I'm going to move like this, closer to this cardboard piece, and in the virtual space, I will actually come in closer to it. Right now, the state of the basic technology in VR does not allow me to do this. The sphere moves with me. If I wanted to get closer to this and I'm in VR, the whole thing would move away with me. I would not be able to come closer to this in VR. That's what we call room scale. When room scale is already available for CGI, for animation, but not for live action images. It's going to happen, it's going to take a little while, but it's on its way, and that's going to be a major improvement.
Yeah.
And the haptic, like this lady on the screen is wearing haptic gloves, that's the other kind of interaction where you will be able to actually touch, where you will be able to actually feel physically if there's a plant near me, I'll be able to approach it and touch it, and the gloves will allow me to physically have the sensation I am touching that plant.
Talk a little about sound design in VR.
Sound design is key because it needs to be spatialized the same way that the images are, so that if we're having a conversation and I'm looking at you, the sound needs to come from you. If I'm looking away and you're still talking, now the sound needs to come from this side, so that it always, the sound is associated to the image. That is simple in principle. It's not all that easy technically in certain cases.
So there is a scene in which, like you said, a thriller, couple talking on a table in a restaurant, outside something is happening. Maybe I cue the audience by that sound that something is happening. So then they are going there, then this sound of the couple talking fades away, and the chaos of the street outside because the killing goes somewhere else. And then maybe somebody runs and says something has happened, and then I go to the kitchen where I mean you have to.
Absolutely, or you have a sound of something breaking or falling. So all of a sudden I'll turn around.
Yeah. So you could control, in a sense, how people view a film, you know, except that you couldn't totally control it.
Yes. Yeah, sound
so
is
you
a
have
big
you have
help.
to believe that the film that they might see may not be the film you want them to see, or maybe you want them to see all of it and again and again.
Exactly, but sound is an editing tool in VR.
In VR.
In the sense that every single person edits the film in his or her own way just by choosing where they're looking.
That's
and
right.
Sound is a way to control where they're looking, absolutely.
So every sequence in VR is a shot. I mean, let's talk about the mise-en-scene. I mean, like you're now a director. The mise-en-scene of a VR film, like, you know, when you block a scene, you're not taking 5 different shots of the couple talking, are you? So what is the idea of the mise-en-scene?
You just need to shift. This is the exercise I was mentioning before. You need to start shifting from thinking blocking a rectangle to blocking a sphere. That's all. Once you get that, it's just like a trigger in your mind. Once you know you need to block a sphere rather than a rectangle, it's the same. It's just that it needs to be all around. In editing, it's the same thing. I mean, people think we cannot edit from one scene to the other the same as in cinema. It's not true. It works exactly like in cinema. You edit the same way. The only difference is that you need to stage and block your scene 360. That's the only difference.
That's the only difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to close in thinking, how soon is this going to be happening? I mean, VR right now is a little bit the talk of the time, you know, where everyone's getting excited with VR, and I think it's great. There are great, exciting aspects of VR becoming ubiquitous. There are dangers of isolation. dangers, physical dangers. We don't know what it does to our eyes, to be, with screens so close to our eyes. There are dangers of confusing virtual reality and physical reality, and there are dangers, psychological dangers, of making physical reality feel more boring, more dull than the virtual reality, just because there won't be special effects, in the physical reality. You won't be able to change your appearance, you won't be able to fly, you won't be able to live underwater for hours, all of that. So there's a danger that we may progressively feel as VR becomes more and more realistic. We may sense that, oh, it's so boring to live in the physical life, nothing happens. So that being said, there are tremendously exciting creative challenges in VR that we are just on the edge of exploring. You have to remember that the language of cinema took 25 years, a whole generation, to be developed at the beginning of the 20th century, right? Yeah. We see it today as a language that is universal. We all understand.
Yeah, even when Godard was cutting and, and jump cutting, that was a development which took some time to grasp. I mean, today everybody does it, so you kind of flow with it, and you expect it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we are at the same moment as the Lumière brothers were at the end of the 19th century. We need to understand how it works in VR. And we're just starting this. But what we know is that there's so much money being invested in VR that it's no longer a question of whether VR will be successful or not. It's too late for VR to fail. It will be a part of our future, whether we like it or not. The question is, how long will it take? Right now, the consensus is that the VR headsets as we know them are really clumsy, ugly, they make you look stupid when you wear them, and so it's a problem. But that's not going to stay like this. Those headsets that we have now are going to transform and become lighter and lighter. Very recently, a month ago, Google released its Google Daydream, the new headgear that is much lighter, made of fabric, and that you can use your smartphone into. Snap glasses went on sale yesterday afternoon in the US. They are glasses made by Snapchat. You wear them, and by tapping on the side, you can record up to 30 seconds of what you're seeing. And by tapping once again on the side after you record it, it goes directly on Snapchat, on your network. This is not VR, but these objects, they sell for $130, and they're sold through vending machines in the subway stations in New York. People were lining up all around the block to get one of them yesterday. They're all sold out, in a matter of an hour or so. These glasses are the beginning of us understanding how glasses can be connected. It's the beginning of our trip towards VR, AR, and MR glasses. The future headsets will look like this or like this. This is a prototype by Apple, and this is what we will be wearing, all of us, 5 years from now. The prediction is that 10 years from now, we will no longer have smartphones. Everything will be done through glasses. We will no longer be using keyboards. We will be using a language of gestures, which is shaping itself as we speak, which will be the language of virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality holograms. We don't have the time, but I encourage you to look to search on YouTube the Facebook VR presentation that was made by Mark Zuckerberg at Oculus Connect just a few weeks ago on how Facebook is going to start migrating to VR in just a few months. Everyone will want to have glasses when Facebook allows you to be with friends in a virtual space, play together, share together, and do all kinds of things together. So as a conclusion, I just wanted to say that VR, whether we like it or not, is about to disrupt our world. It's going to be the ubiquitous interface very soon. It is going to be a language. It's a new option that we have as filmmakers to tell stories. And it's really up to us to decide what we do with it. We can totally ignore it, which is absolutely fine. We don't have to do our stories in VR.
Yeah, just as we don't have to do it in 3D.
Exactly, and we can still do them in black and white, and we can do them silent. It's an option, but just so we just need to know it's there. We can ignore it, but we can also embrace it and try it. I would just like to conclude in saying that it's actually quite cheap and easy to make films in VR right now. You can buy cameras, you can do it with people that have cameras, and the post-production is not that complex. You can try it for yourself. Very soon, I mean, there are cameras, the Ricoh Theta S is a 2-camera object that costs only $300, and that allows you to do VR films and post them directly on your smartphones. So you can try it right away, and in doing this, explore whether it's an option for telling stories that you like or not. But just be aware that it is coming, and it is coming in a very big way. My personal excitement and passion about this as an independent filmmaker and coming from the independent filmmaking world of Flatties, I find it tremendously exciting for us as independent artists and filmmakers to explore this new option and see what we can do to make it a true new art form. Thank you very much.
After this talk by him, what's the question that you have for him?
Good evening. First question, what's the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality?
Augmented reality is when you apply a layer of digital information over physical reality, mostly through either glasses. There was the failed attempt of Google with Google Glass, or you can also use your phone for this, where you have, by scanning reality, you have objects and information appearing.
What is the format that I need to edit when I'm trying to edit virtual reality, if I have 32 cameras which I've been using?
What you do is that you have an automatic rendering. When your 32 cameras are synchronized, they have an automatic stitch. That stitch, which is a sphere, can be rendered on a flat screen the same way that the Earth can be seen as a flat map, right?
So are these 32 layers?
They're not layers. They're one single image that shows the whole sphere flat. And you edit from that using, you know, the Final Cut, the standard.
Final Cut allows that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
But stitching remains the big issue of having a clean stitch.
Quick question, one more. You showed in your sketch the way you stitch areas. So when to stitch that, so the different areas before on this left side, on the center, on the right, the different cameras would be actually shooting those sections. Is that right?
It's like pieces of a cake.
Yeah, that's the question that I get confused with. How do you stop one camera from seeing the other?
Yeah.
No, the cameras don't see each other because they're rigged in such a way it's like a
so that
slices of a cake.
planning of the camera positions becomes quite crucial, right?
Well, actually, you first have to design your rig, meaning you have to design the box in which your cameras will be placed so that they never see each other. They're close to each other so that they never see each other. It's like having the camera at the center of a cake, and each camera is filming a slice of the cake.
So you were saying that we can even use the existing cameras to do VR shoot. So other softwares to basically combine all the MP4s and then stitch into one single one?
Yes, you can. I mean, the most standard system for filming VR right now is using GoPros. You can rig GoPros together. There are rigs that are available on the net where you can rig up to like 24 GoPros together, up, down, and on the side. And you need to have a software that synchronizes them perfectly.
So I mean, tell me, I mean, there's a sequence which I saw, a family having dinner. A girl enters, and there's the whole room, right? And then I can turn around and see the whole room. Where's the camera?
In that case, if it's a subjective point of view, the camera is on her head.
On her head.
Or in the case, someone was mentioning porn.
Yeah.
In porn, it's really interesting to see how they do, because they really want you to have the experience of a subjective point of view,
Yeah.
whether the man perspective or the woman perspective. And I'm talking about porn because porn is probably the only industry already making money, like always, with VR. The actor has the head inside a cage. There's a cage that is all around him or her, and the cameras are stuck all around the cage. So the cameras don't see each other, but they shoot everything all around.
All around.
So that's the subjective point of view.
So GoPro is one option. We can use Canon 5D.
You can use any camera up to the RED cameras. There are rigs for that in every system.
And similarly, along with the camera, you need to take the sound record in different direction also.
So for the sound, you need to have a different sound system. Most people use binaural sound systems where you place the sound very close to the camera. Usually it's under the camera. The camera will be on a tripod, for instance, and the sound will be rigged just under so that it is synchronized in a similar way as the cameras are.
The sound mics that are taking the ambient sound.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So for every
to which you can add mic
with the actor as you do in cinema.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have many more questions, but only one question I'll ask you. You said hybrid reality. So I think Microsoft announced HoloLens.
HoloLens.
Can you say a little bit about that?
HoloLens is what we call mixed reality. It's a system that allows holograms to be introduced in physical reality, and they can be seen through glasses. If you Google HoloLens, you will see films that show you how it works. But basically, if the two of us were wearing a HoloLens glass, we could be watching a dancer dancing on the table, and we could look around from every side, and it would feel to us as if this dancer was really here, part of reality, even though it is only a hologram. That's mixed reality.
We have Saurabh Doshi here, who is Facebook head media partner. Maybe you have a comment or an observation.
Yeah, so first of all, this was super exciting, and Facebook is also working a lot around VR. So obviously this is the future as we move from video to now the next generation of 360 and all of that. My question was that as kind of filmmakers, will this be like a reality where we probably go to watch a film and that time the scenes are happening and kind of we see it in real time, and how do we kind of match this entire thing with real time? Like sometimes in the games and all of that you try to do, but will it ever match with the reality happening that time?
Yes, I mean there already are options where you can watch sport events which are streamed real time. You cannot be present in it, but you are watching it as it's being filmed and as it's being edited. Performances and concerts are a big part of the market for VR. Fashion shows, for instance, you will have soon more and more options to buy a ticket to be at a fashion show in New York, in Milan, or in Paris as it happens, and it will save you, if you're a fashion writer, journalist, it will save you the trip to wherever it happens. So streaming live events in VR that are rendered directly in the gear is definitely a technology that is ready and that is already happening.
You said many filmmakers are entering VR filmmaking, like Scorsese made Hugo, 3D. Who's that one master who's now going to, because the medium will be defined by its masters, I mean, slowly we will understand what they do.
I mean, it's been publicly announced that Steven Spielberg is getting ready to shoot Ready Player One, which is a novel, science fiction novel, that will be shot entirely in VR.
Yeah.
Peter Jackson is working on a project in VR. Lucasfilm has announced that the next Star Wars, not the one they're working on now, but the one after, will be entirely shot for VR. There was even questions whether it would be released in a flat version.
Yeah.
And series, there are tons of people working on VR series. Because series lends itself very well to VR. You represent Facebook? Mark Zuckerberg did this test at Oculus Connect, it was like 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, which was very, very impressive, showing how Facebook is going to migrate to VR. It was not announced when, but the sort of rumor is that it could be sometime around next spring, about 6 months from now, that the first options in VR for Facebook will be happening. So I don't know if you have information to give us about this, if it's been announced, when it's going to happen, but it's definitely going to accelerate the need for people to have a headset.
Nothing as yet. Nothing as yet.
He's not allowed to say.
I have one question. It's it's for the next generation VR. Suppose I'm in a room, and my character sits there, which you say the sphere moves with you. So my character is there, and there's a dialogue that he's writing or she's writing something. And I actually want to go and see what the character is writing. Suppose. Now, if I'm sitting in a room which has a 10 by 10 width, 10 feet by 10 feet, but my character in real world, not in the virtual world, is sitting almost 10 meter or 20 meters ahead. So how do I walk, and how do the simulation will be defined in a conversion, I don't know the formula, so that I walk for just 5 feet and I define 20 meters.
Yes, that's the room scale effect, and it's really, really interesting because there are so many options that are being explored. One of them, we don't have the time, but I could show you a video. One of them is a system where you wear socks with magnetic pods, and you have like a circle which is maybe 3 feet in diameter. And you stand in the middle of that circular platform, and you have a harness around you so as not to fall. And as you walk like on a treadmill, you can walk on this thing, and you can walk forever. And all the walks, if you run by standing on that platform, or if you walk slowly, or if you walk backwards, you reproduce the exact same movement in the virtual world. There's a game that's coming out called Skyrim that uses that technology, and you can use it that way.
I was shooting one VR for my client, and they had a demand that why don't we go and see, they want to see the facility.
No, that you can't do it because that's a challenge of room scale. In live action, you cannot do that for the moment. The technology is not ready. The technology that is going to be used is called photogrammetry and videogrammetry, which is very complex, where you are going to be able to shoot a picture or a video of someone or an object from every possible angle to render the option to move around that object or that person. When that becomes available, there's a camera called Lightro, which is coming out soon, and which will allow photogrammetry. You will be able to do it, but then it will be your choice in the virtual space to move. It won't be the director's choice. The director's choice will be to create the whole environment within which you will be free to move.
When do you think this revolution is going to happen? When this technology?
I think it's going to be 2 years before it's really available. It is already available in CGI, but not in live action.
Hi, I was just thinking that this virtual reality is actually going to take film back into theater, and that instead of the theater being in front of us, it's going to be all around us, and it's actually going to change, or we are going to lose the film language that we have developed in a certain way, which is, for instance, montage. I can't imagine Odessa's steps in something like that in virtual reality.
You're absolutely right in equating VR to theater more than cinema. It is true that it's like being immersed in the heart of the stage, and then you can decide where you're looking. And it is also true, you are right, that in doing so, we're losing some of the language, grammar of cinema, close-ups, for instance. We can now, you can have like characters come close to the camera and have the equivalent of a close-up. But it doesn't have the same effect as in language where you focus on just that one choice. We don't know yet. The grammar and the vocabulary of VR is not ready to compete with the grammar and vocabulary of cinema, which is 130 years old already, while the grammar and language of cinema is maybe a year old. So we don't know yet how we're going to create the equivalent of those structural elements of cinematography. But it's going to come, and other things will be happening. But one thing is for sure, is that yes, it is closer to a live event, to a theater performance, than it is to cinema in terms of the user experience.
It's how we can hide lights, because lights is all around to let focus. Because I have done one of a VR in 3D. Okay, so that's one of the successful thing. But if we have to do it in a live, so how we can hide the lights? Because you can see anywhere. Like.
There's something we call clean slating in VR. I mean, now we're going into like technical details. I don't want to go too far into it. But what you do is true for lights, but it's also true for sound. If you have a sound, mic system, you need to block it. You need to take it out.
Erase it.
Erase it.
Yeah.
Yes. So what you do, either for light or for sound or for anything you want to take out of the image, there could be also a technician, something that cannot be done without a technician holding something. You need to erase it. So once you've shot your scene, once you've done all your takes, you don't move the camera, but you take out the light. You take out the light you
like
don't
a stop
want.
block.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You take it out.
Yeah.
You take the sound out. You take the technician out, and you reshoot. And in the editing room, you're going to take that slice of the cake, the camera take, that corresponds to where the light was. You're going to take the slice from the shoot without it.
It's like what we do in multiplication, when we do VFX and we increase.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that in the final thing, you have the effect of the light, you have the light on the scene, but you don't have the source. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's called clean slating in VR.
Yeah. Every shot is VFX, almost. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. So what is going to be the distribution channel for the VR content? I know if it's a live VR, we can monetize it. And how are we going to monetize the content?
The way it's distributed right now is through dedicated platforms. There are two kinds of VR distribution platforms. Those that you can access with your phone, if you want to use a Google Cardboard type of VR headset or the Google Daydream. You can just download the app, you select a film in the app, you download it, and then you watch it. So those platforms, there are many of them that exist that you can download stuff from. If you want to watch stuff on the more high-end devices like Oculus or HTC Vive, you go on their sites and you do the same thing. Right now, most of the content is for free. You don't have to pay for it, and that's because it's a way to attract people and make them understand what they can do with a VR headset. Well, if you want to monetize it, you can start having discussions with platforms that will take it as an exclusive content. I can give you some prices that have been released. Some of the most popular independent VR contents like Notes on Blindness or iPhilip have been sold for 30,000 euros for China, for instance, only. Similar prices for the US, and that is in exchange of an exclusive content for one platform. So when the content is exclusive and interesting enough and unique enough, there is the beginning of a market. We don't know yet what platforms like Amazon, who just hired their new VR head, and they have not made any announcements yet, but they're heavily producing stuff so that when they launch their VR channel and their VR service, they will have exclusive content. Now they pay for that. And you as a user will most probably be paying a subscription fee to Amazon to access this content. Netflix is about to announce their VR service and they will be paying. So there are also more independent platforms. There's a new platform called Lens out of Australia, who is trying to position themselves as an independent VR platform, and they have contracts that are on a pay-per-view basis. So Ulu is also developing a scheme that will eventually pay on a pay-per-view basis as well. So it's happening, but there's still not enough people who own headsets that we can talk of a market. Until we all in this room have a headset with us, we can't talk of a market.
So that's wonderful, and I guess, you know, there are places, you know, maybe you can tell them when they have a further inquiry on VR, there may be a site they can go to, or where you have conversations with filmmakers. Is there some place? Because this is such a developing thing that there are questions as you... Because what is very interesting is that what you said now was, and from her question, that it is more, and for me as a filmmaker to understand, it's more akin to theater than to cinema as we know it and how it's been developed, and the skill sets that we have developed need to sort of be redefined in some way if you want to do VR. So maybe there's a place where they can go to interact more. Maybe you can tell them about that. And he's available after this, I guess, outside for any specific question. We have to end this now.
Yeah, one question here. So I have a question about sound. So do you think the sound of open world games is similar to VR films? Because one of my friends is working in Rockstar Games, and we had a conversation about sound, and he said that sound of VR films will be more convenient to make in the studio instead of live. So what do you think about that?
Yes, because the manipulation of sound is key, as we said, and so you need to work in the studio to clearly identify the source of the visual source of the sound, to equate sound with image. And the recording, the live recording of sound is not enough to do that. So you need to go back and identify the different channels, depending on the number of channels you've had to capture the sound. You need to go back and make it more obvious in a way, and decide, you know, how many slices of the cake you will have for sound. Ideally, you would have the same number of slices as you have cameras, but it needs to be reworked in the studio, and it is quite an intensive work, and the same as stitching. Stitcher is a new job in the VR industry, and it's quite an important job to give a clear, clean sense of a sphere. The same way, a sound spatializer is also a new job, working on making the sound clearly attached to the visual component of the video. So yes, there's a huge amount of work that needs to be developed in that field. To answer your question, I would recommend, I mean, what I do, I can say what I do to keep myself informed is that there's a Facebook group that you can join that is probably the most active right now, and it's called Virtual Reality. It's based out of Sao Paulo in Brazil, and it has about 30,000 followers right now, and it is the most complete and active of all groups giving information about VR. So if there was one, I would recommend this one.
Thank you. Thank you.